Star Trek VI, The Undiscovered Country, is one of those things that we're lucky it even happened at all. After Shatner's embarrassing Star Trek V, The Final Frontier, it looked like the series was over. Paramount just didn't want to take a chance with another expensive Star Trek movie that might be critically panned and a commercial failure. Shatner himself shouldered the blame for this, claiming that budgetary concerns forced him to compromise a lot in making the film, and even at one point asked for Paramount to give him the money to do a director's cut for DVD, but he was turned down. Just a few years later, though, came the 25th anniversary of Star Trek, replete with all sorts of merchandise, including those video games we all just love so much. The 25th anniversary is the only reason another Star Trek got made, but it was quickly decided to be the last one starring the original principal cast. And from then on, they would make movies out of Star Trek The Next Generation, which was in its fourth season when they were filming Star Trek VI. The reasons for this were many. The popularity of the old series was being eclipsed by the popularity of the new series, and the cast of the old series was, well, old. If you remember being around these times, there were a lot of jokes about it on The Simpsons, which skits such as Star Trek 12, So Very Tired. A lot of the cast was out of shape, and actually before the finalized idea for Star Trek VI came along, there were various other ideas, such as doing a prequel that would recast the old characters as young cadets, or a story where all of them except for Chekhov get kicked out of Starfleet for not passing fitness tests and introducing a new cast. In the end, the old cast did return one more time, but they had all pretty much agreed that this should be their last adventure. The film itself is a fitting end to the original series era, and it ends with the cast's signatures, as if they're signing off on Star Trek. Star Trek VI is one of my very favorites. It was the first Star Trek film I saw that was still new. I didn't get to see it in the theater, but I rented the tape as soon as it was out, and unlike the previous films, which I had people telling me all their opinions and preconceived notions about, where I pretty much knew the entire plot going in, this was the first one that I saw fresh, and I'm not ashamed to say in the least that I like it the best out of the original 6 films. Nicholas Meyer was back in the director's chair. He had previously directed The Wrath of Khan. Now, this is fairly funny. Despite the fact that most fans like The Wrath of Khan the best at this point, Meyer had a real hard time getting along with Gene Roddenberry. And when he submitted his script, Roddenberry proceeded to pick it apart line by line, detailing everything he felt didn't fit into the Star Trek mold. I guess he really was still pissed about Shatner's mess. Roddenberry preferred the future of seen in Star Trek to be highly idealized, with things like prejudice were completely eradicated. Meyer preferred a more realistic approach, rationalizing that these things have been around for all of our history. They're not going to completely disappear in the next 2 centuries. Actually, I kind of agree with Nicholas Meyer on these points, probably why I like his Trek films so much. One major point of contention was the character of Saavik, who had appeared in Star Trek II, 3, and 4 previously. In Meyer's original draft, this half-Vulcan, half-Romulan was supposed to betray the Federation. However, Roddenberry balked on this, saying, "You can't have a beloved Star Trek character be a traitor." Meyer countered with, "I created this character, I can do whatever I want with her," but it just wasn't meant to be. Robin Curtis, who had played Saavik, was unavailable, and when they tried to cast Kim Cattrall as Saavik, she was unwilling to be the third actress to play the character, so they just created a new character, Valeris, who is also half Vulcan, though according to what I have read, the other half isn't human like Spock or Romulan like Saavik, but Klingon. Fascinating. One funny thing about Cattrall is she had a nude photo shoot on set, wearing nothing more than her fake ears. When Leonard Nimoy found out, he hulked out on her and tore up the photos. Most illogical. Anyway, I've rambled on enough. Let's talk about the movie. It has a lot in common with The Wrath of Khan. Back is the militaristic feel and all the nautical themes. Now, The Wrath of Khan was originally going to be called The Undiscovered Country, referring to death. This one has the title referring to the future. And as death was a big theme of that film, this one is all about the future. Praxis, a moon of the Klingon homeworld, blows the fuck up, throwing the Klingon environment and economy into ruin, and calling their empire's future into question. Peace talks are open for an alliance with the Federation, with whom they had previously been hostile and at times in open war with. Spock, who is transitioning from being a captain to being an ambassador, recommends the Enterprise crew to extend the first olive branch by escorting a Klingon High Council member to the peace talks on Earth. Kirk is fairly aghast. He detests the Klingons. Part of his prejudice is due to having been at war with them for so long. Part of it is due to wanting to preserve Starfleet, but most of it is due to the fact that it was Klingons who killed his son David. Many of the Enterprise crew feel the same and are very nervous about this idea. Upon meeting the Klingons, Kirk invites them for dinner aboard the Enterprise, which you can clearly tell he's hoping they'll say no to, but they show up anyway. They meet the Klingons, including General Chang, who is played by Christopher Plummer, who has an affinity for Shakespeare. They all get blitzed on Romulan ale and argue over the idea of peace. The Klingons believe that this will lead to the death of their culture, while the crew just clearly doesn't trust them. After they leave, the Enterprise apparently attacks the Klingon vessel, though no one can figure out exactly how that happened. Then two Starfleet officers wearing spacesuits and gravity boots go on board and assassinate the council member. Kirk surrenders when the Klingons start firing and boards the ship to talk. Bones goes along and tries to save the council member, but he dies, and the two are arrested for his murder. There's then a meeting between the President of the Federation, who honestly looks like he's part Klingon anyway, Sarek, a Romulan delegate, and the Klingon High Command. The Klingons are still willing to go forward with peace talks, but only if it's in a neutral and secret location, and only if the Federation do not attempt to extradite or rescue Kirk and Bones. The two go on trial and are quickly found guilty. Interestingly enough, their lawyer is Worf's grandfather, who is also played by Michael Dorn. I thought that was pretty cool. Anyway, Colonel Worf loses the case, but gets them a better sentence than death, so they're shipped off to a gulag. Meanwhile, Spock has taken control of the Enterprise and is heading up his own investigation, believing that a traitor on board the Enterprise is behind this, and that the torpedoes were actually fired from a cloaked ship hovering below it. In the gulag, a fellow prisoner helps Kirk and Bones escape, but she also has plans to kill them. Before they say who's behind it, though, Spock manages to beam them out of there. The investigation continues, and it turns out it's Valeris, that is the traitor. Spock forcibly mind melds with her, which is a fairly disturbing scene, and finds out it's General Chang, a Klingon admiral, and the Romulans that are behind everything. They find out from an old friend, Captain Sulu of the Excelsior, that the peace talks are on Khitomer. Hey, that's where Worf grew up. Anyway, they go there, and there's a final battle with Chang. Kirk and Sulu just kick his ass, and then they save the President of the Federation from assassination. Turns out these conspiracists were just against the idea of a Klingon-Federation alliance, each for varying reasons. Chang and the Federation Admiral are just warmongers, while the Romulans don't want the Klingons to join their biggest enemy. The movie ends with a note of hope. The wall has come down in space, and, as we know from The Next Generation, the Klingons become the Federation's biggest ally in the future. It also ends with a note about how people think. Each of the crew members on board the Enterprise harbored their own prejudices, and Chekhov states that it's lucky they don't arrest people for thinking, or they'd all be in jail. Star Trek VI, as I mentioned, is just great. Easily my favorite of the original 6 films. It's the darkest and most serious, and isn't overly encumbered by jokes, though there are a few funny moments. The performances are great, the plot is epic in its scope, the special effects are great, and it starts to bridge the gap towards The Next Generation. It's just a great swan song for the original cast. I loved how it had themes of political intrigue and conspiracy, but still had plenty of action. It never became stodgy or pretentious, and it wasn't preachy. The characters don't lecture the audience, but merely expose their own flaws, from which we might learn about our own. This was intended to be the last, but due to its success, talk of Star Trek VII started happening almost right away. But the cast knew better. They knew it was time to put it to bed, pass the torch, and I think that was fairly gracious of them. I have to give Star Trek VI a perfect 10. It's a joy to watch and an excellent execution of a great concept.